Now, today is November 11th, 2011, Veterans Day. Jane, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Jane Bowers Jones. I was born in Clinton. My parents were born in Clinton. I have lived other places, but eventually came back to Clinton to finish out my life.
You said you were born in Clinton. When were you born in Clinton?
May 4th, 1912.
1912. So that means next May 4th you're going to gain triple digits.
Absolutely. But I hope they have no parties or whatever you call it. I just like to have my birthday with my family.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. You mentioned your parents. Can you talk a little bit about your parents?
Yeah. My father was Clyde Crawford Bowers, and he also was born in Clinton. His father was Henry Bowers, and his mother was Emma, and she died when he was 7 years old. He had a brother who was 5 and a sister who was 3 months. His father took the mother back to Ohio, to her home, to bury her. And he brought my father back, but left the 2 younger children in Ohio with the maternal grandmother. So my father was raised as an only child. Henry did not marry again until 20 or 25 years later, and he married Lyda Wilson from Dubuque, whose father was a judge, they tell me. That's all I know. Henry Bowers was an attorney. My mother was Sue Huffman. Her father had a music store on 5th Avenue for many years. And her mother died when she was 12 years old.
Gee whiz.
And her father remarried. And she had 2 twin half-sisters and a half-brother. And she married my father March 10th, 1910.
Is that right? Where did they get married?
On 4th Avenue South. To me, as a child, it was a large house. Now it is not. It's a good-sized house. In the 500 block of 4th Avenue South. I have the announcement in the paper of the wedding.
So they were married in the house. They were not married in the church.
No, they were not married in the church. And then they went to Oklahoma to live, where my father was living in Okeen, Oklahoma. And they lived there for about 2 years, and I came along, and my mother wanted to come back to Clinton. She didn't like it in Oklahoma, and so she came back here, and I was born in Clinton.
I assume your father went to Oklahoma to practice whatever his profession was?
Well, my father was a jeweler. He graduated from Bradley University in Peoria in 1895, I think it was. He was jeweler and watchmaker, and he went to Oklahoma and opened a drugstore and a jewelry store. I had pictures of them, of the store, but my daughters have confiscated them.
Let's just say assumed custody, huh?
Pardon?
They assumed custody of those.
Yes, that's right.
Of those items.
And so then he came back and opened a drugstore and a jewelry store on the corner of, it was right across, on 2nd Street, right across from the courthouse and Iton Cracker Factory.
Cracker Factory, the Snow White Cracker Factory? The Snow White Cracker Factory? Yeah.
And he had that for some years, and then he got typhoid fever, and something happened to his eyes at that time, and he was never able to do watch work, but he could do clockwork and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
He had. So,
Where? Tell me about life when you were growing up. Where did you grow up? In Clinton, I guess. But
yeah, on 6th Avenue South. My grandfather had built a house there in the 600 block of 6th Avenue. And after he died in November of 1911, before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And his widow lived there. Then she passed away, and my father bought the house, the family home. And that's where I grew up, was on 6th Avenue.
What house number do you remember?
618 6th Avenue South.
618 6th Avenue South.
Mm-hmm. I don't know whether you want to go into this or not. The house had 14 rooms, and in the 20s, my folks decided they would make divided into apartments. Two apartments. We lived downstairs, and they'd rent the upper. And they borrowed $2,500 to complete, because bathrooms and so forth had to be put in.
Mm-hmm.
And the house had to be raised because it wasn't deep enough for a cellar. It was up.
Oh, uh-huh.
And they wanted to put furnace and modernize it. And the man, they borrowed it through the City National Bank from a Mr. Townsend. The bank, it was Mr. Townsend's money. And he did not, my folks wanted to pay it off, but he did not want it paid off. He wanted the income from it. So depression hit.
Mm-hmm.
And about 33, Mr. Townsend died, and his nephew acquired the estate, and he wanted his $2,500. And the way I remember it, see, I was about 20 years old at that time. My father said, I've got $1,000, and the bank wouldn't lend my father any money. They weren't lending money at that time. And he said, I'll pay you off it. And Mr. Townsend said, I want it now, and I'm going to foreclose. And he foreclosed. So the house, my folks owned the house next door to that, which they had used as a rental house. So they moved over there to that. And there was nothing they could do. And in 1938, Mr. Townsend had the house torn down. He never rented it. He never did anything with it. It just stood vacant.
This is the nephew of the man who...
The man, Mr. Townsend, I don't know what his name was.
Did he work for the bank also?
No, he didn't work for the bank,
Uh-huh. Had no connection to the bank.
as far as I know. But you know, there was no money back then. My father had some, and but he said no, so he really lost out on the whole thing. We never could quite understand why. He didn't take what he could get at the time. So that was that. And as I grew up in that house, there's a picture. My daughter has the original of that. That's my grandfather sitting there. There's the clock behind him. It's right here.
Let's see here. I have all these things. Oh, that clock looks a lot newer than what I would have thought.
He built it.
He built the clock?
Yeah. He was, and my father made the working part.
Huh.
And my daughter painted it orange.
Oh, so that's not the original color.
No. No, she liked it that color, and I said, well, I don't care. 40 years ago. And but but this is the house. To me, it was a very ornate house. When my mother got in there, these were bead curtains, and all of this went.
She didn't like the Victorian style.
No.
Tell me about school. Where did you go to school?
Well, I started kindergarten. I think it was called the Grant School, but I'm not sure. And it's down where the City Hall is now.
Okay.
Between the Presbyterian Church was on the 6th Avenue corner,
Right.
the Methodist Church was on the other corner, and
The school was in between.
this was in between. And there was kindergarten through 7th grade. The whole junior high was upstairs on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And we went to kindergarten all day, and I went there through the 3rd grade. Then the new high school was built, and they needed more room for the junior high, so they moved the kindergarten through 6th grade over to the old high school. Now, I was thinking the other day, there was a school between the Baptist church on the corner and the Roosevelt School, and I can't remember the name of that. Was that the Brown School?
I think it was Jefferson, wasn't it?
No, Jefferson was over where Sacred Heart is now. Where
Oh,
the
is that right?
Catholic school is.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Okay. And I have a picture of it here. In junior high, I went from 4th grade through 6th grade at the old high school. Then we went over to the junior high, and there wasn't enough room then for everything. So we had to come across the park for math, or arithmetic and math, and home ec and shops. Can you imagine in the dead of winter walking across, a bunch of kids walking across the park and behaving and getting to class on time? Not today.
Did they get to class on time in that day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We knew, but Miss Cummings was the principal,
Uh-huh.
and we knew you got to cross the park, cut back again.
Who else do you remember from the teaching staff at the school in
Well,
those days?
Miss Stribe had home ec, Isabel Stribe, and Mary East was math. Miss McCarthy, there were 2 Miss McCarthys, Mary McCarthy and another, can't remember. She was the art teacher, and Mary MacArthur was the music teacher. Miss Woodruff, I think, taught science. I've kind of forgotten.
How did that change when you moved over to Roosevelt?
But those were the junior high teachers.
I see. Uh-huh.
Well, we
So
were,
by that time you'd moved over to
yeah,
Roosevelt.
and then back again. When we were over in the city hall, there were 2 grades to one room, 1st and 2nd grade, 3rd and 4th grade. When we went over to the high school in 4th grade, we were 1 in a room. And let's see, I can't think who was kindergarten teacher then. 1st grade was Miss Howes. 2nd grade, I can't remember. Oh, Frances Greenlee, I think. And 3rd grade, I can't remember. 4th grade was Miss Loeb. 5th grade was Thera Brown.
Logue, is that L-O?
G-U-E, and they lived up
G-U-E.
on 8th Avenue.
Uh-huh.
And I used to be scared to death of her.
Pretty severe, stern woman.
She was real severe.
Battle axe?
Yeah, but as a teacher, she was an excellent teacher.
Uh-huh.
Then Thera Brown, who was a sister to Mrs. Emmons, Dr. Emmons. And her father, they lived on 6th Avenue in the 500 block. And let's see. Miss Pedersen, P-E-D-D-E-R, was my 6th grade teacher. I'm kind of digging things up.
Yeah, well, you mentioned a minute ago Sacred Heart church.
Uh-huh.
Your grandfather had a connection with that building, at least, didn't
Yes. In the early, when he came here, I think he was born in 1839
he? Mm-hmm.
in Baltimore, Maryland. And his father, now I don't remember, once I was told he was captain on a ship, and he was of German extraction.
Mm-hmm.
And he anyway, he was lost at sea. The ship was lost at sea.
Mm-hmm.
And the mother brought 3 children to a relative, I don't know whether it was, who it was, near DeWitt,
Mm-hmm.
after the father died. And so that's how he came to Clinton County. But it's in the, I used to have, I may have it yet, the census from that time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they mention Brother Joseph, but he must have died because I never heard of him.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So he came to Clinton County, and from there he, then he came to Clinton, and then at that time, Clinton was very Catholic. I mean, you know that by the number of churches that were here.
Mm-hmm.
And they had excellent schools, but the public schools didn't amount to much. That's the way I understand. And he and Calvin George, I'll think of the others, some other, they were all lawyers. They decided that they were going to, and of course they had all the Catholics had all the political jobs.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, that's the way I understand it.
You mean they were elected to the city council?
Yeah,
and
that's right.
They were the mayor?
Because
and
they
so
were the
forth?
majority people in town.
That's the way it tends to work sometimes.
And so these lawyers were Protestant, and they decided that they were going to set up a group and try and get some of these people out. And that's when what was it called?
American Protective
Yeah,
Association?
Yeah.
APA?
Yeah, they did that. And that's what started that. That's the way I
Uh-huh.
understand it.
And they used the building where Sacred Heart Church is now located as their headquarters, right?
I don't know.
Supposedly, yeah.
I don't know that part. So, and as my father used to say, his father was gone a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and all of his papers went to Des Moines, to the Historical Society.
Mm.
Although I inquired about them, and they said many of them had disappeared because people would borrow them. I've had students come
Mm-hmm.
and ask me, they were writing something, a thesis or something, and they had been borrowed and never returned.
Hmm. So they didn't have a very good system for checking out materials.
Evidently not. But this was when I inquired about it, and they said there's still papers there. There's letters from Clemenceau and in
Clemenceau
France.
from France?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And different things. There were interesting papers. But my father was not interested. If you ask him, I don't know anything about it. He said, I was growing up, and we always had a housekeeper, and my father was gone a lot. He said, I always had enough money to take care of things. But I think it must have been a lonely life, because he talks about Christmas. And he said, he was always great with us to have a big Christmas, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He said his dad would give him money and say, go buy what you want.
Huh. Well, that's every kid's dream, right?
Well, he said other people had, you know, Christmas dinner and all that. He had Christmas dinner, but he said it wasn't a special time.
Mm-hmm.
And he said at that time they went to church, and Christmas Eve, and he said a custom was that the parents would have gifts for their children
Mm-hmm.
after the service. He said he never had that.
Huh. So he felt left out, huh?
Yeah, sort of left out. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, he just lived sort of his brother and sister would come in the summertime,
Mm-hmm.
or he would go down in the summer.
Shift the topic a little bit.
Mhm.
When you were a child, who were the important people in town at the time?
I can't.
You know, what we would call the movers and shakers today.
Well, of course there was Calvin George, but then he jumped off the high bridge. That I suppose I was 10 or 12 years old.
So he committed suicide.
Yeah,
Do you know
I-
what was behind that?
I have no idea. He had a family, because
Mhm.
quite a good sized family. And his wife ended up in the Independence
So his wife had mental illness.
after that, yes.
I
And
can
those
imagine
children
if
were
they
kind
had a
of,
large family and she was
Yeah,
left with the children alone.
there was Dorothy and Franklin, they were my age.
Mm-hmm.
And Shepherd,
Mm-hmm.
that's the other lawyers that I was thinking of. There were two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the Shepherds took the two younger children. The other children were pretty well grown.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they lived on 6th Avenue in a red brick house across from Roosevelt School. The house is still there.
Uh-huh.
Because there's the apartments there.
At the corner.
No. On the corner Curtis's lived,
Uh-huh.
in that house.
Which Curtis lived in the house at the time?
George, I think. Eugene lived over on 5th Avenue. I think it was George.
Because the Curtis Mansion on 5th Avenue, the George Curtis Mansion,
Oh, no, that
was
wasn't
built
George.
in
But I
1885.
can't think, I don't know. But Curtis's lived there. And then Whitley's lived there.
Uh-huh.
After that, they bought it from them.
Mm-hmm.
Then going down on 6th Avenue, I don't know who lived on the corner, or the Carsonsons lived the next house. Then Rutz,
From the insurance business?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
and John's mother and father. John,
Uh-huh.
his mother and father. Then my grandfather lived in the next house. Then Harris's, then Ellis's,
Mm-hmm. Which
Then I-
Ellis? Frank?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
the one that moved up on 4th Street.
Uh-huh.
That's my dishwasher. It's making the noise. Let's see, then I can't remember the next one. And then Wilson's.
You're still on 6th Avenue?
I'm still see. And then I think Toll. Henry Toll lived on the corner.
Henry Toll. Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Because I was, and then it's right across from the park.
Mm-hmm.
Then I remember when Jane Ellis died. And they put her dollhouse up on a big thing, and it was became a birdhouse over in the park.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's like well, it isn't there now, but there used to be the Ellis house, and then there was a little house in there between Harris's,
Mm-hmm.
and that was Jane's playhouse when she was growing up.
Mm-hmm. Jane Ellis,
Jane Ellis,
the only child of
the only child.
Frank Ellis.
And she had a polio, and then she died, I think, of spinal meningitis
Mm-hmm.
in her teens.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
'Cause I remember that. So
Now that park was a very nice park at that time, right?
absolutely, it was just a park.
Uh-huh. And it had trees and
Everything.
walkways.
And you came up, and then in the center was
like a gazebo, wasn't it?
a flower garden or something.
Uh-huh.
And then you went straight across again.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, when you were a child and growing up and later as you became an adult, this was before we had the feminine revolution.
Mm-hmm.
What's your view of the role of women in those days?
Well,
how women were treated and how they thought
I
of
can
their-
tell how I was.
Well, that's a good point of view.
I wanted to be a lawyer.
Like your grandfather.
It was an impossibility.
Uh-huh.
So my choice was I could be a nurse, a teacher, a telephone operator, stenographer.
Mm-hmm.
And I chose teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I went 1 year, after high school, I went 1 year at Brown's Business College because my grandfather thought women should not be educated. And my mother listened to her father a lot because they got married and it was a waste of money. Men should be highly educated.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, well, to my mother and to my dad, why don't you send her to let her go? This was in 1930.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down to Brown Business College or Scoville's, I can't remember which. It was the same one, but two different names.
Right.
And for 1 year, and I said, that's it. I'm going to college. I don't want to go be a stenographer.
And where did you go to college?
Wartburg. It was there,
Oh,
or I could go to Mount St. Clair for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether it was 2 years then or not. I know it was 1 year.
So you went to Wartburg
I went to
when it
Wartburg.
was still here in Clinton?
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And I graduated from Wartburg. I went 4 years.
Did Wartburg have any sports teams?
Yeah, they had a football team.
And what was their mascot? What were they called?
I have no idea.
Oh, you...
Oh. I got these out the other day. I don't know what. Maybe you can find out.
Let's see here. Wartburg, 1931. Dr. W.M. Wallaker.
Yeah, see, I didn't have one that year. So he had bought one for his office, and Catherine and I were great friends, his daughter Catherine. And that's Bob Wallaker's father.
Uh-huh. What extracurricular activities at Wartburg have meant to me? And there were things by Clarence Hinkhouse and R.C. Schulater. This is the Wartburg Clarion was the newspaper, it looks like.
I don't even remember them having that.
Uh-huh. What did you participate in activities at Wartburg?
Oh, music.
Music.
See, I took organ from Reverend Chamberlain. He was a professor of music, I think.
I'm looking here. You were not in the Orpheus Music Club, however. Were you?
Not, see, 31. I should have been, yeah.
This is 1931. And they had the Philomathean Literary Society.
Yeah. Now here I am as a junior. Right? Isn't that my picture?
Let's see here. I'll look at the Jane Bowers. Let's see here.
I was a junior.
Let's see. So this is Jane Bowers right here. And that was in 1931, is this? Or no, 34.
34.
And this is Jane Bowers in 2011.
Yeah.
So a few years later. And it says you were in, it says you were in Orpheus, Forum, Mixed Chorus, Apollo, Orchestra. You were the president of the orchestra group?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Because I played violin.
Oh, you played violin, and you played organ.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And at that time, I went to Albany. They needed a band director. So I went over there, and I had the band. I go over there 2.5 days a week. I made the great sum of $10.
But then, after you got your teaching degree, how many students went to Wartburg at that time?
I can't remember.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. But Dr. Carey went there for a couple of years. Dr. Emmons went there. There's so many that I can think of that went there because they could live at home, you see, and it was too expensive to go to Iowa for those first, it was like a junior college.
Uh-huh.
But many of those men that went there were going to be Lutheran ministers. and went
Uh-huh.
on to the seminary up in Dubuque.
Now, did you know Maxine Law?
Oh yeah, very well.
She was voted the most beautiful girl. Huh?
Yeah,
And did you know Mildred Johnson?
yeah,
She was voted the most popular girl.
yeah.
She's a good-looking girl too.
Uh-huh.
And were you involved in the pep club?
No, no.
No?
See, I think when I was 20 years old, I went over to Albany to teach. And then Thompson, Illinois needed one, and so I went up there a day. So I was gone actually 2 days a week from
Uh-huh.
college. So I didn't have a whole lot of time.
Did you study German at Wartburg?
3 years.
Aha. So,
I
sollen wir
I
ein
don't-
bisschen auf Deutsch sprechen, oder?
I don't do it very well. I can't remember. It's too many years ago. Yeah, I had 3 years.
Ja, they had der Wartburg Verein. Es ist ein Freitagabend. Das Licht scheint durch die Fenster der Hütte. And so forth. They have a whole article here, huh?
But I can't. I remember they had a football team, and they played it down on the Clinton High School. The games down on the Clinton High School
Uh-huh.
field.
And, well, let's go back to people that were movers and shakers when you were growing up. Do you remember?
I can't remember.
You can't remember who they
I'm
were.
trying to think of them.
Well, then maybe...
Dr. Kirshner was the doctor in town. If
Uh-huh.
you had anything serious, you went to Dr. Kirshner. The rest of them were, just regular
Mm-hmm.
doctors.
So he was the most respected doctor in town.
Absolutely. He did all the surgery and everything
Mhm.
like that. And the House brothers, it seems to me they were mayors most of the time.
Uh-huh.
I can't. One was a dentist, and that they were I remember just at that time I was really not interested in politics,
Uh-huh.
and I just can't think. No.
Back in those days, we still had the streets that were sort of a canopy of elm trees, didn't we?
They had what?
The elm trees.
Oh yeah, and
lining
they
the
came to a
streets,
center.
made a canopy.
In Fifth Avenue, you came out, it was just like a canopy.
Uh-huh.
And they were, it was just wonderful to drive up Fifth Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't too many houses west of there were a few west of the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
Jane Land. It was Agatha when I was born. It was Agatha Hospital. I'm the oldest child, and there were 4 of us, and the rest were all born at home. I was the only one born in the hospital. Yeah.
Who were your siblings?
I had a brother, was born when I was 4 years old, and he died when I was 7. He was 3 years old. Then my sister Betty was 5.5 years older, 5.5 years younger than I am.
Mm-hmm.
She's Elizabeth Francis, but was never called anything but Betty.
Mm-hmm.
And I have another sister, Nancy, who's 10.5 years younger than I am,
Mm-hmm.
who passed away 3 years ago.
Mm. And your sister Betty, when did she die?
She lives in Iowa City.
Oh, she's still living.
Yes.
Good for her. Huh?
And she moved to Iowa City about 4 years ago because her daughters lived out there.
Mm-hmm.
And she's 93.
Mm-hmm. So she's got a good start on life.
Yeah.
Let me go back to the question of women. You said there were limited career opportunities for women when you were
Most of
growing
them
up.
went telephone operators.
But there were women lawyers. I imagine you knew Margaret Koldyke, didn't you?
But she read in her uncle's office.
Uh-huh.
You could do that. I wanted to go to college
You
like
wanted to
the
study.
men did.
Uh-huh. And you were denied that.
Yes.
They would not accept women, or
Well,
it was
that's
just
what
not
I
the custom for
understood.
women to go.
That's what I understood. And yes, there were a lot of the lawyers read in other lawyers' offices, then passed the bar.
Well, who were the main lawyers in town when you were
Well,
growing
it was
up?
Calvin George and the Shepherds, the two Shepherds. My grandfather was gone, and those were the only ones that I knew of.
I see. And so you studied to become a teacher rather than a lawyer. And what did you teach?
I have a major in English and music, a minor in German and math. I taught English, and thank goodness I went to secretarial school, because the second year I taught in Grand Mountain, they decided they wanted to put in shorthand typing and bookkeeping. So I went back, I went up to Mount St. Clair. They were having a summer school for the nuns, and some teacher from Greg Shorthand was coming out to teach it. And I went up there and refreshed and taught shorthand and typing for 3 years, and bookkeeping in Grand Mountain, had the band and the music. And I guess I taught some other things too. I got geometry, I can remember. And then I came to Lyons and taught English.
Taught at what level? In
9th grade.
9th grade. And where was the school
Was
located?
on the corner of 3rd Street and Main Avenue. It was a junior high because the 9th grade was in junior high.
And at that time, of course, the high school was over by Foursquare Park.
And it's still there.
How long did you teach?
I taught 4 years in Grand Mountain, 3 years in Lyons, and then substituted down at Clinton High School until 1968, when my mother wasn't well, and she came to live with us, and I quit then so I could be with her.
Now you graduated from Clinton High School from the building that was built that opened in 1922.
Yeah, so it was 4 years old when I went there as a freshman.
So it was a nice new school then.
Brand new, and I didn't realize it. And my father was very much against having it built there. I can remember.
And why was he opposed to it
Because
being built there?
as a youngster, he'd gone out, it was low water level, and he didn't think it was stable enough for that building. And of course, when they built the junior college, they had trouble with the floors there.
Well, in fact, where the high school and the community college are located, that is a floodway.
Yeah, because he said he used to ice skate out there.
And it's one reason why the pool that they are now replacing had to be replaced, because the ground was unstable.
So I guess maybe he was right on something.
Yeah. It's interesting, being trained as a jeweler, you wouldn't expect that he'd be thinking about engineering questions,
Yeah.
Did you go out on the river much when you were growing up, when you were a child?
No. My folks thought it was too dangerous. Although my mother talks about going out in a canoe or all that stuff, and my father, but they would never.
That was when they were kids.
That's when they were kids. But they.
And their parents didn't know that they were there, probably.
That's probably. So, but no, I didn't do that. Now, Eagle Point was Joyce's park when I was little. And you get on the streetcar at 6th Avenue, went down to 5th Avenue in 2nd Street, and transferred to another streetcar. Then you went from there to Main Avenue. Then you transferred again and took one up to Eagle Point, and it went around.
Oh, so it didn't go straight through. I had always assumed that the streetcar line going up 2nd Street
No, you had to
went all the way-
transfer.
Uh-huh.
It took you about an hour.
To get there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then it was just a wooden building, the way I can. And the streetcar went up and around, kind of where the cars go now,
Mm-hmm.
and went back down.
Came back.
And there wasn't much there. I mean, there was this building, and it was a nice place to go for a picnic, and they had some tables.
Mm-hmm.
But, and we used to do that on a Sunday afternoon,
You enjoyed that.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
as a youngster.
Mm-hmm.
In the summertime, they had the open cars.
Uh-huh. More fun still, huh?
Yeah, that's right. So, and I think the fare was 10 cents. I can't
Uh-huh.
remember. It was
Pretty cheap.
pretty cheap, yeah.
Yeah.
And when I was real small on 6th Avenue South, the sidewalks were wooden
Uh-huh.
because I got roller skates I wanted roller skates. And I suppose I was about 6 years old. I got roller skates, but I had to go over to 5th Avenue because they had cement sidewalks to skate. Because you couldn't skate on those wooden sidewalks very well.
I would imagine it'd be hard. Yeah.
And then Darlene Gordon comes in there because she grew up on 6th Avenue when I did, and I played with her. She was older, about 2 years. And she had a bicycle, two-wheeler. And she was about the only one that had one then.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad was sitting on the porch, and if you knew Darlene, very outspoken, she said, "Mr. Bowers, why don't you buy that poor kid a bicycle?" And for Christmas I got a bicycle.
Oh, is that right?
It was a second hand with my father.
Still a bicycle.
It was still, so Darlene and I bicycled.
Mm-hmm.
And,
How was your street? Was your street paved then?
no, it was a brick.
Brick Street.
And the streetcar came down it, and the inner, we call it the inner urban,
Mhm.
or the I&I, went from, it ran every hour, the inner urban. The streetcars, every 15 minutes. One was a north-south and one was a south. They divided out about 9th Street
Mm-hmm.
in there someplace.
Hmm.
Because if the weather was bad, I could take the streetcar. I had to walk up to Mount St. Clair to take my violin lessons.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was real bad, I got a dime to take the streetcar, but I had to wait, see, about a half hour.
To catch it.
Yeah.
Did you ever take the interurban?
Yes, to Davenport.
How was that?
That was fine. I
Uh-huh.
think it went to Muscatine at one time, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I took the interurban.
Mm-hmm.
We'd go down there maybe to shop, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It,
Where did you like to shop?
oh, well, Harnard and Van Maar were still there.
In
And
Davenport, you mean?
They were on that corner. I can't think of the name of the one on the other corner.
Mm-hmm.
The big department stores.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a place where you could eat in the basement. And
Mm-hmm.
it was almost like going to Chicago on the train.
Uh-huh.
You could do that
And you did that?
once, I think.
Uh-huh.
Once or twice. You'd catch it about 6 o'clock in the morning or 5
Mm-hmm.
and go in. Marshall Fields is where you always ended up. And
Mom used to talk about that.
and then you'd catch it and come back at night.
Mm-hmm. Eat in the Walnut Room for lunch?
Yep.
Uh-huh. When did you get married?
In 1942,
1942.
I was 30 years old.
Uh-huh.
I met Ed in high school. He taught in high school and coached.
Also, he was an older man.
He was 33 when we went together 3 years,
Uh-huh.
and maybe I wouldn't have married. We wouldn't have married as soon then, but he drew a small number for draft,
Uh-huh.
and he was going to be called up, and he had a friend who was at Livermore California, who was not in the Army, but he worked in the Army as a recreation director at the airfield. And he got in touch with Ed and he said, why don't you apply? And he did. So he left in March as a civilian, went out there, and then after we were married, he was taken, the Army decided they had to be in the Army. There was Air Force, Army Air Force.
Army Air Corps.
There was no Air Force then as such. It was Army Air Force. And he was sent to Miami and he for officer training school. In 43, I think it was.
What attracted you to Ed? I mean, I'm sure you knew a lot of guys by the time.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. We were interested in, I guess, the same things. And in music. And I was not, I've always been klutzy as far as, I played a little tennis and a few things like, but I never was good at that. I went to the Turners. That's another part of my life. The Turner Society.
Down on 4th Avenue and 2nd Street.
Yeah, and it was an old wooden building then when I went there. And I can remember marching around. And
When did they build the brick building that they had?
I can't remember that, but I went there too. And I think my folks had hopes that I'd grow out of it, but I just never was very good at anything like that. And I don't know how I got on the Turner Society.
Well, you were talking about the shared interests that you and Ed had.
Yeah, but I was interested in what he was doing, his coaching and things like that. And we were thrown together as, you know, as teachers. It was see, Lyons was different. They had their own school board. And Clinton had theirs. And in 1953, when Ed was assistant principal at Clinton High School, they went together. So,
How long was he at Clinton High School?
from 47
Till?
till 74 when he retired.
So he was at Clinton. He was on staff there when I was a student there, huh?
Probably.
I graduated in 58, so.
Oh, yes, he was there. He was assistant principal at that time.
Is that right?
And,
I knew Harold Weber, of course.
Skip Weber was the principal.
Yeah,
And Ed was assistant principal.
I see. Well, I never got sent to the principal's office, so I
No,
guess
so
I
you
didn't have a
probably-
chance to get to know him.
No, oh. Now I have to stand up and get my feet
Balance
moving
there,
before I start off. That's when we got one of them, and this is when he retired.
Let's see here.
He came from Albia, Iowa. So,
And so how many children do you have?
2 daughters.
2 daughters.
Virginia is 67. She taught at Indian Hills Junior College in Ottumwa. And's retired. And Susan lives in Richmond, Virginia. And she's 64.
And what does she do?
She and her husband have an insurance agency. Have
I
had it
see.
for a long time.
So do you have grandchildren?
I have 5 grandchildren. Matt is a lawyer in Chicago. He's 41, not married. And John is in Plymouth, Massachusetts, married and has twins, 9 months old. He's 37 years old. He was kind of slow. I mean, he and his wife, they've been married.
Only in terms of their timing for children.
In their
but-
children, I'm talking about, not mentally.
Yeah.
No, in having children.
Uh-huh.
37 years old and having 9-month-old twins. Why? And then comes Sean, and she lives in Atlantic, Iowa. He's married and has 1 little boy. And her husband's a coach in schools. She works in human resource. And then Megan lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, and has 2 little boys. And she's a speech pathologists in a hospital. And they're all married. And Seth, the youngest, lives in Altoona, Iowa. They're all married except Matt, who's the oldest one.
So let's see, you have two daughters.
Two daughters, yeah.
Two daughters, 5 grandchildren.
And 5 great-grandchildren.
5 great-grandchildren.
4 boys and 1 girl.
Uh-huh. And no great-great-grandchildren.
No, my oldest great-grandchild is 3.5 years old.
So it might be a while before you have
I'll never be here for that.
Oh, stick around. Well, of course, you would remember, do you remember any part of the First World War?
The only thing I remember about is we didn't have eggs and sugar. They got syrup from the Clinton Corn Company,
Mm-hmm.
and they used that to make candy and whatever. And we didn't have eggs. I can remember that. They had powdered eggs, the way I remember them.
They were delicious, I'm sure.
I guess we just ate them. And I can remember when the armistice was signed. Am I taking too much time?
No. I was just checking to see how long we...
Oh. My father had a pistol, which he kept up on the top of the cupboard where we couldn't get it. And they went out, and the neighbors all shot up into the sky when they heard the war was over.
Oh, when the war was over. Was your father a hunter?
No.
No.
No, he just had a pistol.
I see.
No, he didn't hunt. And that's what I remember. Then I remember the flu.
The 1918 flu epidemic?
Yeah.
Did anyone you know die in that?
Oh, yes. They had several friends that passed away, my folks, and then very close friends had children the same age as we were. And the boy and girl both died of the flu. And I remember that.
What were your parents' political feelings?
They were Republicans.
And what Republican policies were they most interested in?
I have no idea.
They didn't talk about it very
No.
much, huh?
And my grandparents, Huffmans, my step-grandmother was a Democrat. My grandfather was a Republican. And they came to Sunday dinner almost every Sunday and holiday. And the thing was, I can remember, if anybody else was invited, don't talk politics. Because if they got and it was Republican, my step-grandmother would get up and go home. And it was the other way around. If it got too Democrat, my grandfather would get up and go home. And so I can remember that.
So you had to limit your conversation only to sex and religion.
That's right. And they stayed off of religion most of the time, too. And then my mother's half-brother was a lawyer, and he was in Washington, D.C. I don't know. He went there with some politician. I can't think who it was now. I used to know, but I can't remember.
How has Clinton changed since you were a child?
Well, to me, it was a safer, happier place.
And why do you think it was safer and happier then than it is now?
I have no idea. Because we used to go downtown or places where I wouldn't have let my own children go. And I can remember teaching in Lyons, and they having things at night, and the kids coming up Main Avenue down by the river. It just seemed to me that it was a safe. Well, there weren't the autos. Let's put it that way. Very few people had autos.
So you either walked or took the streetcar.
Most everybody walked or took the streetcar. And I think that was it. When I had saved up money from working at Kresge's and so forth, and babysitting, and I had $150. And when I was 18, my father couldn't drive because he couldn't see well enough.
Mm-hmm.
He had had a car when I was real little. The door opened in the back. Anyway, so I decided I wanted a car. So I went down to the Ford garage and bought a Model T.
The Ford garage on 6th Avenue?
When I was 18 years old. And I'll show you something. 1930 says Ford on there.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to put it up
Here.
for a garage sale, and one of my friends said, "Oh, let me look on eBay."
Mm-hmm.
She found one, $150.
Well, and then what you should do is take it to Antiques Roadshow. They'd probably decide it's worth even more than that.
So that's all I have left of that car.
So
Well,
who sold you the Model T?
seemed like his name was Rand or something like
Uh-huh.
that.
How long did you have the Model T?
About 4 months, because then it got winter. See, I bought it the end of summer. I decided I went down all by myself.
Mm-hmm.
My daughters can't believe that I would do that at 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I traded it back in for a Model A because it wouldn't start. It had a starter, but in the winter, it was a cold day. Didn't have to be as cold as this fall. You couldn't start it. You had to crank it, and I couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I traded it for a Model A, and I borrowed the extra money from my grandfather and paid him off. And I drove that until I went to.
This would have been your grandfather Huffman, huh?
Yes, my grandfather Huffman
Mm-hmm.
had the music store. And I think I got a picture of him here somewhere. He built, let's see, let me sell that. These are all my pictures.
Didn't you tell me you also bought a car from my dad?
Yeah, well, I drove the Model A, then I bought, and I might have traded in that Model A for a V8.
Uh-huh.
I think about right, soon after I went to Grand Mound.
Mm-hmm.
I traded that in for a V8. And I had that until 1940, and I was teaching in Lyons, and I went back out and traded that in to your dad for a brand new 1940.
Too bad you don't have that car today.
Yes, I sold that to Hortense Blake's father. Hortense liked the car, because she could see out of it.
Uh-huh.
So after I got married, I left it for my folks. Well, my sister Betty taught at Franklin School, and so she was still home with my folks, and I left it there for her.
Mm-hmm.
And then she got married, and then my folks, I said, well, just leave it, and they can get the neighbors to take them to get their groceries and so forth, But they never did. So it sat there one winter, and they never used it. And Mr. Blake, I talked to, or my sister, somebody talked to him, and he bought it.
Mm-hmm.
It was maroon color, and I remember it was the first one that had a sloopy back. And now when I think about it, it just went down this way. It didn't, it looked so modern,
Uh-huh.
And so that.
Well, it's interesting. Around that period of time, there was, nationally and internationally, there was this desire to be modern.
Yeah.
And a lot of style reflected that. Looking back at that, what do you think of that particular movement, if you will?
Well, I suppose we had to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And things were changing.
Did you ever go, you mentioned that you'd only gone to Chicago on the train once?
Once or twice, I can't remember. I know really once, but I think there was two times.
So you didn't go to the World's Fair in Chicago in 1933?
Yeah, I went to that.
Did you see Sally
I drove
Rand?
into.
Did you see Sally Rand?
No, I
With
didn't.
her fans?
But I have I don't know what you call it, but you look through,
A stereoscopic
Yeah,
thing?
with Sally Rand in it.
Oh.
I've got one of those. Down in I think it's down. I tell you, I don't know what's down there much anymore because I'm not supposed to go down.
Uh-huh.
And the girls coming. And my one granddaughter always said, I guess I'll go shopping in your basement, Grandma. And pretty soon something's gone. Which is, or I was looking for it. There's one picture. But my grandfather Huffman, I lost it.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. He built those, and it was right next to the theater. There was a beauty shop. There were 4 buildings in there. There was a beauty shop and Cobb Optical, Laddie's Beauty Shop and Cobb Optical, and I can't think, there's some kind of Baz there. I can't think of that doctor's name. And then there was a, oh yes, that tells about, Mrs. Leaperville had a car, and she called it Priscilla.
Uh-huh.
And she wrote these articles in the paper. And that's when they tore the house down.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then you told me once about some things given. I've had a whole bunch of different pictures. It's one picture of one of the rooms in the museum in the house that I grew up in. Everything was gone when I was, I don't remember anything.
Well, you remember one thing we talked about is when they built what we would now call the old Clinton High School, the one at 4th Avenue and 4th Street and 6th Avenue South. When they first built it, they had a museum there, and your grandfather donated a number of items for the museum. And I have no idea whatever became of those items.
I have no idea.
And I don't know what they were either.
I don't either. But this is one room, and I had other pictures of other rooms. See, and then after my folks went in there, this was all gone because my step-grandmother had sold it. So they had all these rooms. That's why they wanted to make an apartment out of it, upstairs.
They just didn't have enough furniture to use it all, huh?
No, well, yeah, anyway, I don't know. I don't know if you've seen those pictures or not. There.
Oh, the old postcards. Yeah.
That one, I can remember the Lions Bridge when you went up, and then there was a turn.
Right.
Right at the top. And there's a picture of that there. And that's why they built a new bridge, because the trucks couldn't make that turn.
Did you ever go to baseball games here in Clinton?
1 or 2. But that was after I was married.
Uh-huh. You said your husband was a coach.
Yeah.
I don't remember what he coached.
Football up in Lions and basketball.
Uh-huh.
And then when he came down to Clinton after the war, see, he was in the war from 42 to 47, I think it was. Because he went to Clinton High School in 47. He was going back to Lions, and then he got a better job in Clinton High School.
Uh-huh.
So, and he taught science and coached, I think it was freshman or sophomore basketball, and had some wrestling. He taught wrestling because he was a wrestler in Iowa. He was too small. He was 5'8" and weighed about 150 pounds. So he was really too small for football. Intramural basketball he played at Iowa. He went to Iowa in 26. When I went to high school, he went to, graduated in 1930. There were no jobs, so he went back and got his master's degree. Graduated in 33 there. Went to Heitman to teach, coal mining town south. And then after the war, he went back to college and got a second master's degree. Graduated in 53 again. He
That
went
was after
summers.
you were married and then after you had children.
He had 2 children. Yep.
Mhm.
He'd go in the summers
Mm-hmm.
and got his second master's degree.
Mm.
And that's when he became assistant principal in high school. He got it in administration because the first one was in athletics and
Mm-hmm. Coaching. Yeah.
coaching and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Who were some of your good friends in
Well,
life?
Beth,
Mm-hmm.
because she lived in the courts and I lived on 6th Avenue, so, you know, you...
It was just a little further
Yeah.
west from where you
Mhm.
lived.
Catherine Wallaker,
Mm-hmm.
and let's see, Jane Dorn.
Uh-huh.
Her father was, she lived up on Fifth Street. Her father, I think, worked in Crafts Men's Store, or he might have been a partner, I don't know, but he was in men's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And, let's see, Carol Johnson, who was a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and his sister Dorothy. We didn't get around as much as, and of course, football always played in the afternoons because there were no lights.
No lights. Mm-hmm.
And I have to stop and think. That's so long ago. Oh, Lorraine Murphy, who had a little store on 4th Street.
Mm-hmm.
She was married to Ed Murphy. She's the only one that I can remember now that I'm in touch with that graduated when I did.
Oh, where is she now?
Up in northern Wisconsin with her daughter.
I see. Where in northern Wisconsin, you know?
She was Lorraine Evers.
Uh-huh.
Oh, and Ruth Chamberlain. She was a Murphy. She married a Murphy too.
Mm-hmm.
Her father was a chiropodist, Dr. Chamberlain.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived in the house, I think, right back at Sacred Heart Church on 4th Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I kind of remember her
Mhm.
living. Those are some of them. And they're all gone,
Mm-hmm.
except, I wondered if you'd ever seen this.
No, I haven't seen this. Retail Merchants of Iowa Annual Convention, May 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 1912, Clinton, Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And,
It shows all the churches and the different buildings. If you'd like to take that home, just so I get it back sometime.
uh-huh. I'd love to take a good look at these pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had them out and I had to get the magnifier
Uh-huh.
to see them.
Yeah, now, this is very interesting because they have, they have the residence of Justice Lund. Did you ever know of him?
Who?
Justice Lund.
No.
Of course,
The name is familiar, but,
you knew L.C. Mosinger.
oh yeah.
What do you remember about him?
No, I don't remember much.
Uh-huh.
I have to think about it.
Mm-hmm. And did you know the Gates family?
I knew of them,
Uh-huh. They had Oakhurst.
yeah. They went around with my mother's half-sisters.
Oh, did they?
They were twins, yeah.
Mhm.
There was the Gates and the Hemingways, and, let's see some of the others over there. There was Henrietta Gates, I remember her. Oh, and Curtis. There was a Curtis that they went around with. And,
But this Henrietta lived at Oakhurst?
I don't remember. They kind of, there was a big, I guess that was the Youngs. It was a house, just west of the YWCA. That was a Young house. Molly lived there.
Oh.
Molly was in my era someplace. She was
Uh-huh.
older than I was.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the corner, east of the YW, was another Young. And when she died, she left that property to the Y. And then they expanded
Mm-hmm.
and went over there. Those were the Youngs. And there was another house on the corner, but I can't remember who lived there.
Well, the house on the corner with 3rd Street, that was where Chauncey Lamb lived.
Oh.
That was his last house. He had a earlier house here in
Oh.
Clemson. But
I remember that house. I remember going with my dad. They must have been had like an estate sale, because it was a sale of some kind. I remember my dad bought a chair.
This is on 7th Avenue,
Yeah, on 7th Avenue.
on the south side of the park.
Yeah, then the Congregational Church was across from that, and then the Baptist on this corner.
Yeah, the town was originally laid out with a
So
church on every corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, the old Clinton High School was originally where St. Mary's Church was.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
They bought that and tore it down to make what's now the Roosevelt Building.
Yeah. You know, to me it was so sad when St. Mary's was torn down. Beth one day stopped and she said, let's go up. She wasn't driving. She had her Deb or somebody driving. And she said, they're tearing down St. Mary's Church. And she said, let's go up and take one last look. And we did, and we parked in front. They had torn down some of it, but the front part was still intact at that time.
Yeah.
And to me, that was, Clinton has torn down so many fine buildings. When I think of St. Irenaeus and St. Boniface, if they tear those down, I think it would be terrible.
Well, we're trying to save them, you know.
Because
What other buildings that have been torn down do you miss a lot, do you think?
So many on Fifth Avenue,
Uh-huh.
way down, in the 300 block.
All the houses that used to
Beautiful
be there.
homes there. And of course the old Presbyterian church, but it wasn't very, as I remember.
Well, by the time you would have known it, it would have been probably...
It was still in use because
Run down.
I was baptized in that church until my brother died and the pastor came to call. He had had the service and he came to call afterward. And my mother was concerned where if my brother had gone to heaven.
Oh.
You know, that
Uh-huh.
she was, and he said, well, he was baptized. And he said, then he said to her, and he said, as long as he was baptized, he went to heaven. But he said, you know, all the little heathen children that have never heard the name of Jesus Christ are lost, they go to hell. And my mother said, if that's what you believe, take my name off the church, and she never went back to that church again.
Is that right? So what church did she go to, or did she go to any?
Yes, she did. She went to the Methodist, and most of the time. And but she was so... She thought God couldn't be that cruel.
No. Well, and we don't think today that would be the case.
Oh no, absolutely not. But that was just her. And my mother was kind of an independent person. But I thought these are just things that I had torn out of the paper at different times. Oh, I remember on 2nd Street between 5th and 4th and 5th Street, that's where the fire station was. And the old City Hall, you'll find it in that book.
Yeah.
The City Hall was there in this one building and the fire station. And it was a great big...
Yeah, just north of the Van Allen building.
Just, yeah. Yeah.
And what a shame that was torn down.
Oh, yeah. But, I don't know what paper those came out of. But I have my mother's married...
Well, here's a picture of the old City Hall right here.
there. I knew there was one there someplace that I saw.
That's right there. The old streetcar. You know where those streetcars were made?
Pardon?
Do you know who made those streetcars?
No, I don't know.
They were made by the St. Louis Car Company.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And
but I know the car barn was up on 2nd Street.
well, that still is. They just don't use it for that purpose anymore.
And then the interurban car barns were down off the bluff.
Where Rich Toys later
Yeah,
had
that's
their
right.
toy factory.
That's right. Did you see this one?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So
well, let's see here. Did I see this one?
there's some on the back too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This has pictures on both sides.
But see, I remember those car. This is the way it looked when I was a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember what paper I got those out of. Then I've got the clipping from my mother's wedding. And all her death. About 10 years ago, I decided I was going to make kind of a history of the family.
Uh-huh.
And I did as much as I could on the Bowers and the Huffman for my children, with the death certificates and marriage license and so forth. And then I went into the Jones family, Jones and Stokes, and did as much. So my girls have books about that thick.
Oh, of all the material you
Yeah.
collected?
All the material. A lot of it I had reproduced. And it's not as good as it should have been either. I didn't think. There was a place downtown, I can't remember, on 2nd Street, where they did that at one time. Might have been 15 years ago. It's quite a while ago. And this is one of them that they did.
Did you ever shop at Van Allen's?
Oh, yes.
When it was
that
Van
was
Allen's?
it. And Tolan Heights was across the street on the
Uh-huh.
other corner. They did both of them. Tolan Heights didn't, as a youngster, didn't seem as elegant as Van Allen's did. And I can remember old Mr. Van Allen being there with his little black cap on. He was a kind of a floor walker, you would say. He was just always around. And the glove counter was in the front here. Yeah, that. And where Klein's was, that there was a men's store on the corner. I think it was Metzger and Kavanaugh.
It was.
See, it's coming back now,
Yeah.
little things to me. And there was a place in there where they did hats. I remember my father taking his felt hat down to have it blocked or whatever they did to clean. And in there, and I guess it was shoe shine parlor too. I can't remember. And then further down was a family theater on the corner, on the alley. And then was Turner's. And then the family theater was torn down, and somebody had a place in there. It was kind of a dairy place. I can't remember who that was. They had milk and buttermilk and butter and things like that. Things changed, and then I went away. I lived during the war. I lived in Las Vegas, Nevada, and
What was Las Vegas like during the Second World War?
well, it was not much until the soldiers came. There were two big casinos or hotels out on the Strip at that time, just two, and there were lots of them downtown that stayed open. They were just, I don't think they ever closed.
Were there professional ladies there when you were there?
Not that I know of. But I did see, in the railroad, I saw Mickey Rooney get off a train one time. I happened to be down there to pick up. And several other women stars, movie stars at that time. But it just grew instantly.
And why were you in Las Vegas?
Because Ed was stationed out there.
I see. So you were, of course, you were married then.
Yeah.
So this would have been sometime after 1942. Huh?
It was in 43. And we were there 2.5 years. But
Do you remember how big it was then?
it was about 20,000, I think.
About 20,000.
Mm-hmm.
So smaller than Clinton then.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Had a main street.
Mm-hmm.
We lived closer to North Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the airfield was named after a senator. I can't think of his name.
McCarran, wasn't it?
McCarran, that's it.
Mhm.
McCarran Airfield.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was there 2.5 years. And my oldest daughter was born out there
Mm-hmm.
at the airfield,
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
What, in the military hospital?
military hospital.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there were black soldiers, but they lived in a different section of town. They were and they all drove big cars. I don't know where they got them, but they
Who drove big
the
cars?
black.
Oh, they liked the bigger cars?
Well, they said the reason was because their living conditions were so poor they could put their money.
Into the car.
So anyway,
Hmm.
well, that's about.
You think that's all you can talk about, huh?
Well,
Well, thank you.
well, unless you can think of something.
Well, I've tried to sort of come up with topics that I think might... When
Yeah.
did you move here?
1969.
1969.
My sister and her husband and Ed and I built. We owned this 2 acres. We bought it from Mr. Rasmussen, who lived up on the corner,
Mhm.
and this was his farm where the church is.
So all of this was just farmland.
It was all farmland.
At that
and
time.
when we bought it, it was the apple orchard.
Mm-hmm.
And grapes and raspberries. This was part of the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And
Were Burlingames here then?
Burlingame's. Jan's folks owned that house,
Mm-hmm.
and when they died, then they rented it, and she lived down in her folks moved down in the courts,
Mm-hmm.
and they rented the place.
Hmm.
And then when her folks died, I think Jan and Jim came out and took over.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So, and she's still there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I talked to her when I was out knocking on doors.
Yeah, she's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then we had this maybe a year before we built out here. But Ed he said, we lived so close he could hear the toilet flush next door. And he said he'd like to live out here. And the girls had gone, they'd finished college.
Mm-hmm.
And it was convenient where we lived on 6th Avenue for them to walk to school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for him too. And he said, I'm going to retire, in 5 years. So then we built out here.
Mm-hmm.
And I still own the lot next to me
Uh-huh.
up there. I still have my acre.
Mm-hmm.
And Quint sold half of his to the St. Mary's Cemetery, half his lot to
Now,
the...
of course, the cemetery was here when you moved here.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
But they needed more land.
Mm-hmm.
And he held on to it for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then they decided to go to a condo. He retired from DuPont's, and so he sold his 100 feet
Mm-hmm.
to the cemetery.
Hmm. Well, thank you very much again.
Well, I don't know how much I've helped. Probably I've just wandered on. Oh, I made coffee.
Oh,
Judge McCullough's the first one I didn't write clear off.
yeah, I see you have Judge McCullough here. What can you say about Judge McCullough?
Well, he was a neighbor, lived right across the alley from us.
Uh-huh.
And he was a character, really. I assume he was a juvenile judge because, as I can remember, they said that he had sent more young people to Eldora than any other judge in the state.
Really? Well, maybe that reflected the
It couldn't.
nature of the people in this town.
I don't know. But I know Ed would say, I have to go up to court today. That Ed is my husband.
Mm-hmm.
some young boy had been dismissed from school and evidently ended up in court and then had to go up and testify or something. And he said, I know the judge, I'll just sentence him back to school again.
And so in spite of the fact that in the case that he sent the kid back to school, he still had enough that he sent to Eldora.
Yeah, I suppose maybe in the size of the state, of the city, we might have. So I don't even know whether Eldora is in existence anymore.
I think so.
You know,
Yeah.
well, you never hear many of them going there. And then who's the next one on the list?
The next one is Jacobson's.
Oh, Mr. Jacobson, the father, was either a senator or a representative.
I think, well, you had
I don't know.
William Jacobson and B.M. Jacobson,
Well,
right?
B.M. was a son, I think. And I think he's the one that started KROS. Keep right on smiling.
You're a true Clinton native when you know that.
Yeah. And they owned the building there on the corner where KROS used to be. I don't know whether it's still up there or not.
The Jacobson building.
The Jacobson building. Stukas' was on the corner. And next to that, Jacobson's had a sort of a small department store. And upstairs, the second floor, there were offices and a tailor shop, I think. And on the third floor, there's a stage and a big ballroom. I don't know what, and there used to be some club up there, but I can't remember the name of the club.
Well, when the building was first built in 1886, the second floor was the Wapsipinicon Club.
Oh, okay.
Which was the club that existed
That's the
before
one
the
I was
Country
to-
Club. And the third floor was the Masonic Lodge.
Oh, I didn't know.
And then when they built the Masonic Lodge at Fifth Avenue and First Street, they moved out of that building, and the Knights of Columbus moved in.
Yeah, I was thinking the Knights of Columbus used to be up there.
They were at one time. Now it's all empty, of course.
Yeah, but
So, did you know the Jacobsons very well?
yeah, they lived right down the street from us. And BM was younger than I was. I suppose maybe 5 years. And I remember the mother died with the flu, I think. There were the two Jacobson boys that belonged to the... and they moved in with the grandparents, and they lived down on 6th Avenue in the 500 block. Second house from the corner. And the house that's on the corner of 5th Avenue, or 5th Street and 6th Avenue, that house that originally was down where the playground is next to the Roosevelt School, when the high school was there. And that was a manual training building. Have I got that right?
Yes. Yes, I've been doing some work on the old high school building, and I know from the Sanborn maps of the time that at one point that was the manual training building for the
And
high
it was
school.
moved up there, and I can remember that.
And where did they move it to? Or
They moved it just one block up on the corner of 5th Street on the southwest corner.
Southwest corner. Okay, so that building was moved from next to the high school to the next corner.
Not in the next corner up, they made apartments, I think, a couple of apartments. And next to it lived Jacobson's.
On the 6th Avenue and 5th Street.
Yeah. And so and of course, BM was around for a long time.
The next name on your list is the Bathers.
Bathers. Oh,
Bathers.
yeah.
What
Yeah,
can
you
you
remember
say
they
about
had the, oh, it's blank, down on Comanche Avenue.
They had the greenhouses.
Greenhouses, that's what I want. Greenhouses down there. Then they had on 5th Avenue, about in the middle of the block on the east side, there was a flower shop, and Jesse ran that. And then Is it Andrew or Arthur did the one on 6th Avenue on the alley?
So they had two shops downtown.
But they all used the same greenhouse. And they, you know, they were just quite well-known people. You probably know all this. If you know it, why you just stop me?
No, that's fine. It's no matter what I know, it's important to hear what you can remember.
Yeah.
The next name you have on the list are the Suttons.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sutton's lived on 6th Avenue right across from Jacobson's. The second house up on Fifth Street. And Merritt's father was a friend of my grandfather's. And he may have been in that APA too, because they were all friends together. And I remember him well. He must have been much younger than my grandfather at the time. And of course I knew Merritt and all of them.
Was Merritt's father an attorney?
Yeah, he was an attorney.
So that kind of followed in that family. Your next name is the Leslies.
Well, Leslie's lived over on, no, they lived up just beyond Argyle Court on 7th Avenue on the corner. And they had a grocery store on 5th Avenue. And it was kind of a gourmet. And Don Leslie never married. And he was in the store, plus he was an antique buff. And anybody that wanted to know anything about antiques, you asked Don Leslie, and he could.
Is that right?
And he could tell you.
Now, did you ever know James Leslie?
Well, I knew who he was, but I never knew him. Then the daughters, one married Louis Eiton.
Right.
And the other married Dr. He was your eyes and nose doctor. Can't call it right now.
And then you have the...
Of course, the Eitons.
Oh yeah, I know.
All about them. There was Frank and Louis and Anna. My folks were very well acquainted with Anna. I was up in the Eiton home on 2nd Street many times because Anna she had never married, but she was a close friend of, I think, my mother's.
Where was their house on 2nd Street?
Up where Wendy's is.
Up where Wendy's is.
Wendy's is on the corner. Then I think their house was next. It was torn down, I think. It's about the 3rd house from the corner. And Louis didn't marry either. But he went around with Frida Pepper. They were always together. And then, of course, it was Frank.
Well, Catherine Leslie married Louis, didn't she? Or are we at the wrong generation here?
The wrong generation.
I see.
Yeah. Young Louis was Frank's son.
I see.
Frank's son, Louis, married a Leslie. Okay.
Yeah. Because their son, Louis, was a classmate of mine.
Yeah.
Then you have the Moonies.
Well, Moonies lived up on 5th Avenue. The brick house on that corner is still there on the bluff. That's the way I remember. And they had another store which was just a step down from Leslie's.
Oh, you mean in terms of the merchandise?
Yes.
The food.
I mean, it was still a pretty gourmet, but it wasn't, and it was on 4th Street, on the alley. Here's 7th Avenue. And I can't remember what was on the corner here. There was a drugstore here, then Mooney's grocery store. And across the alley was Boston's Meat Market. And it was another gourmet. I mean, that was the place to buy your meat. Because the meat wasn't in the grocery stores then.
Yeah, they didn't have perishables by and large, right?
So, but Mooney's, they were just people who, it was a name in Clinton.
Yeah, what period of time are we talking about here? The 1920s?
This is when I was a child. Probably up into the 30s.
Yeah.
This is pre-30.
Well, of course, talking about food, one of the next names you have on your list are the Sinos.
Yeah, they brought a great change to Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Sino, he had open pickle barrels and that type of thing, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that you wouldn't find in Leslie's or Mooney's.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a store on 2nd Street. He had one in Lyons. He had 3 or 4 stores.
Mm-hmm.
So that it was cheaper to buy at Sino's than any place else in town then. Because there were no big grocery stores then.
Mm-hmm.
It was all little corner grocery stores.
Yeah.
And but Sino brought, it was an altogether different type of merchandise.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And
I can remember that pickle barrel and people putting their hand in and pull out a dill pickle.
you never do that today, would you?
Oh no,
Although I imagine, frankly, the
vinegar.
vinegar that's in there would kill most
Yeah.
germs, wouldn't
Absolutely.
it? So even though it might appear to be unhealthful, it probably wasn't.
No, no. Maybe you're not interested in this.
No, it is kind of interesting to hear about that. What about J.C. Penney?
Well, J.C. Penney has been in 3 different places that I remember.
Uh-huh.
They started out over on 4th Avenue, back of, there's a billiard parlor in there now.
Uh-huh.
And I can't think who owned that building. They lived upstairs. The son went to school with me. It's gone now. I tried last night to think of it. And J.C. Penney was over there.
Mm-hmm.
This is early. And from there, they moved into the building on 5th Avenue that Jacobson's had their store in,
Mm-hmm.
on the north side of the street.
Mm-hmm.
Then they moved over to the south side of the street and became big.
Yeah, were their last locations.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the first store was just a small
Mm-hmm.
store. There's a billiard, it's back of where Restrella's used to be on the corner on 4th Avenue.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a steakhouse there now, I think.
J&D Steakhouse.
Yeah. Well, Restrella's were there. That's where they were. And then,
That was the Windsor Hotel.
yeah.
And that was torn down in about 1950 or so.
Yeah. Then back of that is this, it's a billiard parlor, the last I knew about it.
This is the building that's to the west.
Yeah.
And that was constructed in 1914. And it was originally called a home for bachelors.
Oh.
I have the article from the newspaper when they built that building. And the ground floor today has nothing in it. It's empty.
There's nothing, there's no billiard parlor there?
No.
Oh,
No.
well, see, the last I remember, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But Penny's had been in there. That's where they started.
Oh, that's where they started.
That was,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I remember going.
They were in the ground floor of that building before
Yeah.
it became a billiard parlor.
That's right.
I see. Huh.
And then they moved over to the Jacobson building,
Mm-hmm.
and from there across the street.
And so it must be after they moved across the street. At one time, Woolworths was in the bottom of the Jacobson building. I've got a picture of it when it was Woolworths.
It was Woolworths on the corner. They were on the, they had the whole corner then.
Yeah, in the Jacobson building.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's, Stuka's hardware store was on the corner. And they moved over to, Payson's had a bicycle shop on 2nd Street and 3rd Avenue on the corner. And Stuka's has moved over there.
Mm-hmm. They moved from where to where?
From 5th Avenue south on the 5th Avenue and 3rd Street.
I see.
The Jacobson building. It was
right.
just a small, because the way I remember Stukason's, Jacobson's, then where the brown shoe store was Armstrong's Hardware. But it was huge because it was several floors.
Mm-hmm.
It had heating and I remember.
Yeah. All kinds of plumbing stuff and.
Yeah, much more. Stukas's was just a little hardware store. Then they moved over to where Payson's bicycle shop was.
Who did? Stukas?
Stukas did, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now Now this is the way I remembered.
Yeah, well, your memory's working well for you here. How about Walter's Candy?
Well, they made chocolates. Now, Eiton Cracker Factories here. Then down, I think the next block is a red brick building. I don't know what's in there. Maybe it's not there anymore.
When you say down, you mean
I
going
mean
south?
south.
Mm-hmm.
That was Walter's Candy Factory.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember that my dad always went there at Christmas and bought a pail of chocolate.
Ooh, dear.
And they were called culls.
Mm-hmm.
They all had a little damage, you know.
Uh-huh.
But you could buy a whole,
A bucket full of candy.
yeah, for very cheap.
Mm-hmm. Are you thinking of the building that was originally constructed for Shaw Hutchison Candy Company?
It could be.
It's the one that's still there across from the
Yeah,
Standard Oil
I
Station?
think Shaw's came in after Walters.
No, they built it.
Oh, they built it. Well, then Walters must have come in later.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I've got Walters in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
I think I do. Must be Shaw's that was there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he went to get the chocolate. But there was a Walters Candy Company here. I think they were down on, there was one on 5th Avenue in the 100 block, over where Gobble Produce was.
Well, see, Shaw Hutchison started out next to Goebel.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
But then
And
maybe.
then in 1916, that whole end of the block burned.
Mm-hmm.
And Goebel rebuilt there.
Uh-huh.
But Shaw Hutchison built the building up on North 2nd Street.
Well, then Walters must have come in there someplace.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can remember my folks talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
I never was in, I was in the Eiton Candy Factory, or
Cracker Factory?
Cracker Factory,
Mhm.
yeah. I don't know, took a tour through there or something at some time.
You mentioned Milo John's.
But that was on the corner across from the post office, and that was the, pardon me, drugstore.
Mm-hmm.
And they had two of them at one time. One was down on 2nd Street. Well, people, Clinton National Bank was on the corner of 6th Avenue. Then Stripe Shoe Store. Then there used to be the Farmers Bank, which went,
Kaput in the Depression, right?
yeah, it went up. And then Milo John's came next. It was on the alley.
I see.
But that wasn't there too many years. That was kind of an afterthought. Milo John's on the corner was there forever.
Now, Milo John's, when it was on the corner of 5th Avenue and 3rd Street, did they have a soda fountain there as well?
Yes.
So that would be a place to congregate.
That's right.
They had booths, and
Yeah.
kids especially would go there as
Yeah. We'd stop and get a Coke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they, it was on the west side of the store.
Oh, when you walk in
The
the
west
door.
side, the fountain.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the west.
The post office side of the store.
Yeah. And then it was a pretty, it wasn't such a big store, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you always went to get your drugs.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe phrase it differently compared to today. When people talk about getting their drugs today, they're not talking about
No,
something
no,
as
I'm
innocent as
prescription. I'm talking about prescription over the counter.
Yeah.
You know, type of thing.
Aspirin,
Yeah.
things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the Brickyard.
Now, maybe you know all about it.
Well, I'm anxious to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, the Brickyard was up on 1st Avenue and 5th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember it. But it wasn't there too long, and it was torn down or dismantled. And that's where we used to go to see the circus or the carnivals, because it was a big vacant lot.
Hmm.
And that's where all the streets brick came from,
Mm-hmm.
the way I understand. And you know, when you go down 1st Street past the post office, that brick is, or 7th Avenue, that brick is still good.
Oh yeah, it's the best street you can make.
Yeah,
Put it
and-
down and it's good for 100
Sixth
years.
Avenue where we lived was all brick.
Mm-hmm.
Why they tore it all up, I don't know. Of course, the streetcar went down the middle, but that wouldn't have made any difference.
I would describe it as temporary insanity.
Well, modern. You had to
Well,
be.
modern, you take something that's very durable that requires virtually no maintenance and you replace it with something that's
Yeah.
not durable and requires a lot of maintenance.
And you think about that. It endured the horse traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was little, everything was pulled. The ice wagon was pulled by,
And of course they had the iron horseshoes on.
yeah,
And the rims of the wagons were
Yeah.
all iron.
yeah. You
And-
thought it would have just ruined those streets.
No. It was good hard brick.
Yeah, isn't it up 9th Avenue?
9th Avenue
Past-
has brick.
Yeah, still has it.
Mm-hmm.
When you think how many years that has endured.
Well, getting close to 100 now.
Yeah. And that street on First Street is just as nice and smooth.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a noise.
Which is not the end of the world.
No.
Well, you also have written down here typhoid fever.
Oh, when I was in high school, they had an outbreak of typhoid fever,
Mm-hmm.
and several of my friends passed away. And they couldn't figure out what was causing that. And it was found out that it was in the milk. And it was, I was raised on raw milk.
Mm-hmm.
The man brought it to the house, There was a dairy off of Comanche Avenue, and I've been trying to think of its name.
Elwood or Elmwood.
No, it wasn't Elmwood.
Back in the 50s, I think the dairy there was Elmwood Dairy.
Yeah, this is back in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of, but that was supposed to be pasteurized.
Mm-hmm.
But it was all the people that took milk from that dairy that got it.
Well,
And-
that'll put them out of business fast.
I can't remember whether it did or not. But anyway, it was found that that's where this typhoid was coming from. And it was an epidemic of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be between 26 and 30.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was in high school.
Mhm.
And these friends got it and they died.
Mhm. Hmm.
So, but to me, you'd have to look that up back in the newspapers to find out much about that. But it was sort of a terrifying time.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think people that had raw milk was more likely.
Yeah, normally you think the raw milk would be most likely to be contaminated.
Yeah.
But,
Mm-hmm.
well,
Yeah.
you were lucky.
Yeah.
So, well, these are the topics you have here.
Now, is other page? There's 2 pages.
I've gone through both
You
pages.
have. Well,
One question, you talk about Judge McCullough, then you had the minister, Bruce McCullough, at the Presbyterian Church, right?
yes. Hmm. I don't know much about him.
You don't know much about him,
Beth could have told you that, but
Well, I talked to Beth about sitting down and having a conversation like this, but she never agreed to do it, so we didn't ever do it.
well,
And she had some interesting tales to tell.
oh, I'm sure she did.
When she was a little girl, I remember she would sometimes go to the Lamb House and the girls had to do a curtsy to...
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, but these people, the Lambs and Gateses and Youngs,
mm,
were just tremendously wealthy the way we understood it. We were kind of down in the middle of the merchant class,
mm-hmm.
And now on I think I told you this. Henry Toll was on the corner, and then Wilson's. The next house I can't remember. Then the Ellises,
Mm-hmm.
and the Harrises, and my grandparents, and Roots.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember the one on the corner. But this is across from the park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And-
on the north side of 6th Avenue
Yeah.
in the 300 block.
And then in back of most of those houses, were brick buildings where they kept their horses.
Mm-hmm.
Then my grandfather had, out on 2nd Avenue, someplace out of way, he had pastures where they took the horses
Mm-hmm.
and exchanged them for, and then he had on that back of the house there where the horses were kept. Then on the other side, I suppose was where they kept the tack and so forth. But upstairs was an apartment, and they had a hired man that lived up there.
Mm-hmm. Take care of the horses.
Took care of the horses and did janitor work at the
Mm-hmm.
store and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But he always lived up there, and I used to think that'd be awful to have to live with the horses.
Well, he wasn't in the same. He's a floor above the horses, right?
And a building beside. They were hooked together, but
Mm-hmm.
so anyway. And one thing, this is just an odd thing, and we've talked about it with friends of mine. The ice wagon used to come along and, deliver ice. And we'd go out there, and he'd chip off a piece and give it to us. Think how unsanitary that was.
Mm-hmm. You're probably stronger because of it.
Maybe we ate so many germs we became immune.
Well, they say that one reason there are so many allergies today
Mm-hmm.
and so many people with asthma and so forth is that they haven't had a natural exposure to germs
Yeah.
and mold, dust, pollen, and so forth as youngsters.
That's right.
And so their body never got accustomed to them. And then when they're older and they get exposed to these things, the body reacts much more strongly.
I was cautioned not to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but we all went out and he'd chip off a piece and hand it to us. And another thing I thought about was the spiritualist campground.
Oh, at Mount Pleasant? Uh-huh.
Well, it was spiritualist campground when I was a youngster.
Mm-hmm.
I still call it that. In the month of August, that was a big thing here. All the spiritualists came, and I remember when I was in high school, probably 5 or 6 of us, they had meetings where mediums would be, and for 50 cents or a quarter, I've forgotten what it was, you could go in. And we did that maybe once during the season when we were in high school, just to see what was going on. And there were people that lived in Clinton that had little cabins up there that would move up there in the summertime because it was cooler, they thought.
Well, and they had a swimming pool there, too.
Yeah, that was the first. I did swim in that.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first swimming pool. You can still see
The side of it, the concrete wall.
Yeah.
Mhm. Did it have a filter on it? I doubt it.
I doubt it. I don't.
Like the one at Oakhurst, the swimming pool at Oakhurst had no filter.
Oh, it doesn't.
Never did.
Oh.
And so they'd fill it up in June. The water would be ice cold.
Yeah.
And then, it'd gradually warm up a little bit. And then you could go swimming in it. But then, of course, leaves and debris would blow into it.
Sure.
It would get dirty. So then in July, they'd drain it and fill it again. So then it'd be cold as ice again.
Yeah. I used to wonder that more of us didn't die.
Yeah.
But I guess probably we didn't. We didn't realize it. And another thing that was different as a child, there were no funeral homes as funeral homes. Bergonia's had a place. Then there was one down on 2nd Street. Snell's came in. Mr. Snell, I think, worked for Bergonia. Bergonia's were on 3rd Street, where the Tucker building is now. Had just a little place when my brother passed away in 1919. And they put a wreath on the front of the house, and everybody was laid out in the house, which was...
And then they go directly from the house to the cemetery.
Or I don't remember anybody going to the church. And another thing is that you don't see today are the signs on houses: smallpox, scarlet fever, diphtheria. Because I had diphtheria, and we were quarantined with a sign in the house for 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm. You survived.
Yeah.
Most did not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And because I remember my father couldn't come in.
Mm-hmm.
He would bring groceries to the door.
Mm-hmm. Where did he go then if he couldn't go in the house?
To my grandparents.
I see.
And but he was not supposed to come in. I can't remember whether he did or not, but I remember groceries came, you know, or whatever we needed.
What did it feel like when you had diphtheria?
Mm-hmm.
And what were the symptoms? How?
I had the worst sore throat that I could ever remember.
Mm-hmm.
And
Fever? Fever?
oh yeah.
Upset stomach?
I can't remember that. It was just that I had trouble breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Blunt was our doctor. He was an old doctor and was down on Fifth Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
But Dr. Sugg came.
Mm-hmm.
He was the health doctor in Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
He came and put the sign, or I don't know whether he put the sign up or any, but I remember him coming. Dr. Blunt diagnosed it.
What treatment did they have? Did they have any kind of treatment?
They gave me a shot of something.
Mm-hmm. An injection?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what it was.
Not like a shot of whiskey, but
No. Shot in
in
the
the
arm.
vein.
Yeah. I think it was, I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, remember being so sick, it's just that I couldn't breathe.
Mm-hmm. And when did you have diphtheria?
I think
How old were you then?
I think about 12 years old.
So you were born in 1912, so that would have been about 1924. Huh?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, can you think of anything else?
No, I was thinking of those things that were so different
Mm-hmm.
when I was little, like the funerals, thinking of Beth, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought how different that was, because I can remember my mother. I was 7 years old when my brother died. Her giving him, Burgoners brought up a cot, I guess it was. I can't remember. But anyway, he was lying on this little bed, and she gave him a bath. He was dead, and dressed him. And then they brought the coffin.
Mm-hmm. Sad task, huh?
Yeah.
Very sad task.
Where, you know, they don't even think of those things today.
Mm-hmm. You have somebody else do it.
Mm-hmm. It was just a different life.
Mm-hmm.
That, well, I remember my one sister, maybe I wasn't 12 years old, she was a baby in a buggy because they were so afraid she would get the diphtheria,
Mm-hmm.
but she didn't. But I remember my mother, you know, wheeling the buggy back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe she was a year, I don't remember. So I probably was about 10, 11 years old in that time.
So 22 or 23.
Yeah, in there sometime.
Well,
So, well, I'm sorry if I brought you out here on false pretenses,
No.
but I just happened to think of those things.
no, I'm glad we got it. So,
And the brickyard, I thought of that.
mm-hmm.
And, you know, and the circuses we went to.
Mm-hmm. This would be on First Avenue and Fifth Street. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Which part of the intersection?
It was northwest
Northwest corner.
and going north,
Mm-hmm.
that whole area. Then it was sold off for houses, you know.
Yeah. My great-grandparents on my mother's side of the family lived in the 500 block of First Avenue, just further west.
Yeah.
571.
Up almost to the bluff. No, let's see. I have to get my mind.
No, it's a ways from the bluff.
Yeah.
Yeah.